Today, we're getting into something pretty fascinating, a concept that really explains why learning sometimes feels amazing and other times, well, it just doesn't. We're talking about the affective filter. Have you ever had one of those days? You're just on fire, soaking up information like a sponge, and then the very next day, you're staring at the same page and it feels like you've hit a brick wall. It's super frustrating, right? Well, it turns out the answer might have less to do with how smart you are and way more to do with how you're feeling. All right, let's dive in. The key to that whole puzzle is something called the affective filter. It's this really powerful idea that our emotional state is a huge and honestly and often totally overlooked factor in our ability to learn, well, anything. So this whole idea comes from a linguist named Stephen Krashen. He was actually studying how people pick up a new language. But in the process, he stumbled onto something profound about the learning process itself, something that goes way beyond just learning Spanish or French. So what is it exactly? Well, the affective filter hypothesis says that we all have this sort of invisible emotional wall in our minds. Think of it like a gatekeeper. When that wall is up, it literally blocks new information from getting in. But when it's down, information just flows right through. So what controls this gate? Krashen said it all comes down to a few key emotional factors, which he called affective variables. You can think of these as the dials that turn that filter up or down depending on your mental and emotional state at any given moment. And here are the main controls for that filter. And you know what? They're all things that'll sound really familiar. It's about your motivation levels. How anxious are you feeling? What's your general attitude about what you're trying to learn? These are the big dials that raise or lower that emotional wall. Okay, so let's talk about that first scenario. What happens when that filter is high, when the wall is all the way up? This is the state that makes learning feel totally impossible. When your affective filter is raised, it's like your brain's defenses are on high alert. Imagine trying to have a deep conversation in the middle of a super loud concert. The message, that new information you're trying to learn, just can't get through all that noise. So what builds this wall? Well, it's a list of things we can all relate to. Feeling anxious or panicked? That's a huge one. Being physically tired or just mentally drained. Even a simple lack of motivation or having that negative voice in your head saying, "Ugh, I'm never going to get this." All of that raises the filter and blocks information out. And this quote from Dr. Shazad Karim just nails it. When we're stressed or afraid, our brains just aren't receptive. See, in that state, your brain isn't focused on learning new things, it's focused on survival. And that filter's job is to block out anything it thinks isn't essential for immediate survival. Okay, so that's what happens when the filter is up. But what about the flip side? Let's talk about the ideal state for learning, when that filter is down and the gates are just wide open. When that filter is low, man, everything changes. All that mental and emotional static just disappears. Information doesn't have to fight to get in, it's welcomed. This is when you're in the zone. It's when learning feels effortless, natural, and you make progress really, really fast. And check this out. This slide lays out the two realities so clearly. On the left, you've got the high filter state. You're anxious, stressed, your attitude is negative, and the result? Information gets blocked. But on the right, you're relaxed, confident, you've got a positive mindset, and the information just gets absorbed. It's the same brain, but you get a completely different result, all based on your emotional state. So look, this is way more than just some cool theory. Understanding the affective filter actually gives you a practical tool that you can use right now to become a better learner. And this is so important to remember. Even though Krashen came up with this idea for language learning, the principle is totally universal. This applies to learning anything. Whether you're trying to learn to code, or play the guitar, or understand a complex science topic, if you're stressed out and tired, your filter is going to be up, and learning just won't be as effective, period. So how do we actually put this into practice? Think of it like a quick 3-step mental check-in. First, just take a second to recognize your emotional state. Ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? Am I tired, anxious? Second, do something to manage your environment or your feelings. Maybe that's taking a 5-minute break or putting on some music. The whole point is to get to step 3. Consciously try to lower that filter before you even start to learn. So if you take away just one thing today, let it be this. Learning is not just an intellectual game. Your feelings aren't some distraction from learning. They are a fundamental part of the process itself. They're a key ingredient in the recipe for success. And that leaves us with one final question for you to think about. We're all a little different, right? So for you, maybe it's listening to some chill music. Maybe it's going for a quick walk outside. Or maybe it's just reminding yourself why you wanted to learn this in the first place. What is it for you? What lowers your affective filter?